Ladies and gentlemen, here we are with podcast legend Tommy Casabona from the Always Be Booked Cruise Podcast. And Tommy, is it me or is cruising crazy lately?
I don't know what's going on. First of all, it's crazy that you called me a podcast legend. And, you know, I know there's a lot of wacky things going on in cruising this week, past couple of weeks, and you dialed me up. And I'm wondering, is there a correlation? Well, it's crazy week in cruising. Let me get the craziest cruise guy I know to kind of jump on for a minute.
You may be the craziest cruise guy that I know, but I don't know, man. I think of you. I'll use some of your terminology. I feel like you're more in the pocket than a lot of people, and that not that you're crazy, but I think that you have the ability to comment on crazy and recognize crazy. And you're a free enough spirit where you're not going to be too uptight about it. So, yeah, look, let's be honest. A lot of these folks in the cruise space, they get a little uptight when things get a little controversial. And, I don't think that's what we need, obviously, for this kind of topic. I'm just going to go through some of the events, and I'm going to go in no particular order. Was cruise passengers being left at a cruise port in Hawaii because of a tsunami on your bingo card for 2025?
Not at all. Not for 2025, 24, 26. Incredible. And you don't know. Obviously, this ended up being kind of like nothing really, right?
Yeah.
I still haven't gotten my full-on tsunami news. I heard the alarms. I heard all the, all the measures that were taken, get to the higher ground. We're leaving port. But no, that certainly wasn't. And I'm just glad everybody's okay, right? But they did say, Tony, is it true that the safest place to be is at sea?
Oh, yeah. Any of these storm events, because the ship has maneuverability, I think what I understand is that when you have a ship close to the shore, that's when destruction happens. Because you can't really do much when these waves are battering you. You've either got the waves hitting you and the land on one side. It's definitely not safe for cruise ships to be docked up during typhoons, hurricanes, tsunami, all that kind of thing. I feel like the tsunami warnings, a couple contributing factors. I guess this earthquake was either like an 8.8 magnitude. In the rankings of all the thousands of earthquakes that have been recorded, I think this is in the top 10. I think this came in like number 5 or 6. So I think that put people on alert for sure. And then I just remember seeing that footage of when that tsunami hit Japan or when the tsunami hit, I think, Indonesia or something. And people are just down there on the beach like, hey, tsunami. And then they just all got washed away. And then they made motion pictures about it and stuff like that. So I think there's some aspect of that. And, we both live in Florida. So that we're getting ready to go through a season where people are going to be where somebody's going to say, look, there's a hurricane coming to your area. You should get out of there or you're going to perish. And people are going to make the decision of like, well, probably not, or maybe. And the problem is that it happens enough where it does get bad that you really don't know. So I'm assuming that's what the tsunami war. Yeah, this tsunami didn't turn out to be anything, right? They said maybe the biggest wave that hit those beaches in Hawaii were like 5 feet or something like that. But and I guess that's a whole different kind of thing. I've talked about it on my show today, and I got people commenting from Hawaii like, yeah, we do this all the time. But think of it about from a cruiser perspective. A friend of the La Lita Loca show is Mandy, the cruise planner on TikTok. She just happened to be cruising on Pride of America to Hawaii, and she was on a bus trying to go see a volcano when the tsunami warning came in. And she's got footage of like pulling back up to the ship and the Pride of America like, well, we'll see you later. I mean, like the ship is leaving and she just came from the high ground down to the low ground. And then they had to figure out how to get back to the high ground. She ends up sleeping in a gym overnight. So to me, that's a pretty bad scenario for a cruiser.
It really is. I know some people in Hawaii too right now. They literally, I don't think they've been in Hawaii ever. And they go to Hawaii, and now, there's a tsunami warning. But, yeah, that was what I was seeing from a lot of the TikTokers. They were talking about how you got to be back at the ship at 3:30. Well, they're still on their way out to their excursion, so they knew that wasn't even an option. The funniest part, not funny, I shouldn't say funny, was that there was a cruise ship that was in the area, and you're hearing all sorts of, details are coming in as they come in, and you don't really know the timeline and everything. They said there's a cruise ship that's really in the path. There's one cruise ship that's particularly in the path. I look it up, and it's the Villa V.
Poor Villa
residents
V.
at sea. I'm
Yeah.
like, can this cruise ship catch a break? It was out of control, but again,
There's a positive Villa V story out there. I guess they just celebrated going to their 100th port of call. And I thought that was exceptional considering the challenges that they had on the front end. I don't know what I think about residency at sea. I said it when Villa V was struggling to leave Belfast. I feel like if I was going to live on a cruise ship, I need I would rather have a car built in the, late 2020 or early 2020s or late 20 teens than a car that was built in the early 2000s. And it seems like every one of these residencies at sea, they're going, hey, how much is that? Can I get that thing that was built 25 years ago? I mean, I guess it's the way they have to do it from a cost perspective, but I just don't know that I'd be signing up for an old cruise ship to live on. What do you think about that? You think you could live on a cruise ship? How long could you be on a cruise?
as we sit here right now, I could tell you I would love to live on a cruise ship. And 100%. I get it. I totally understand what you're saying, but I do think there's a charm to the older cruise ships without all the amenities. And I think you go on these things knowing you're not going to get Icon of the Seas. However, I will say this. I could see myself as enthusiastic as I would be right now talking to you. I could see a good, maybe a month and a half in, I'd be like, yeah, maybe it's time to go back. This was fun for a while. I could see it happening either way.
I really thought that there was a time that I kind of romanticized it and said, well, maybe I could live on a cruise ship. But I really find that, if I'm out for more than, I think my longest cruise is 26 days. But if I'm out for more than 10 or 12 days, I'm like, man, what's going on in my house? Or what are the people in my town doing? Or, what new records are in the record shop? Something like that. So I think I'm in the right place for just going out every once in a while. This whole retire on a cruise ship, I don't think that's for me. You mentioned Icon of the Seas. Icon definitely falls into the crazy category over the last 2 weeks. We got two major stories. The first one, crew member gets into an altercation with another crew member, stabs that crew member, and then jumps off of the Icon of the Seas to their death. I got to thinking about it. There's a lot of crew members out there. I'm surprised we don't have more crime from a crew member perspective if you look at the sheer numbers. What was your first reaction when you heard about this whole story going down?
Coincidentally, and we haven't even talked about this yet, but that was one of my first reactions. Now, we can relate both the things we've just been talking about, the retiring on a cruise ship with this. The one variable, there's a lot of variables. Cruising is just a vacation of variables. And one of the variables is, who are you going to end up on this cruise ship with? When you're going to find a place to live on land, you could choose your neighborhood. You know where you're going. I know you moved recently. You probably did some research. You don't have any idea who you're cruising with on a 3, 5, 7, or 12-day cruise, let alone retiring on a cruise ship with. So I would say that would probably have, just going back to the other thing for a second, that would probably have a big effect of that. But my first impression of when I heard that happen, I was like, I always say on my show, cruising is a microcosm of society. You're talking about, little cities or towns on these cruise ships, but then within those little towns come little ecosystems and kind of people you see and the person you wave hi to every day. And I guess it's just the way it is. As the world around us looks like it's getting a little crazier, why would cruising not? Especially when you're talking about a cruise ship that holds 8,000 to 10,000 people. And I did think that same thing. With all those people trapped as long as they are sometimes, and love triangles happen and this and that. I thought the same thing. This is a rare occurrence, and I hope it's not a trend. I hope it's not a new trend.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like there would just be more of it. That's what, it made me really start thinking do they do a lot of checking during the hiring process? I'm not completely sure how that works, but I feel like we would hear about more of this. I mean, this definitely seems like a weird outlier event because I can't think of any other instance in the 7-8 years that I've been cruising. I can't think of any other instance of crew on crew violence. And I feel like it probably should happen. And maybe we just don't hear about it. Maybe it's just so extreme because of the overboard situation. But it's crazy because I know that I've worked in jobs where I go to work and then I would go home each night. And there's times that I would have, screaming matches with other people at my job. So I couldn't imagine living with somebody 24/7, somebody getting under your skin. You got to look at that person every day at work, and then, something goes crazy. Now, I know this was a female and a male, and again, it hasn't really been made clear whether they were in a relationship or anything like that. But if they were, I mean, that's an interesting compounding factor. And then also an icon of the seas. I don't know if you saw this footage of this dude in a bathing suit flipping over the edge of the infinity pool, on the icon of the seas, the adults only infinity pool. Did you see that footage?
Tony, apparently these were some very, very expensive and rare glasses that he had to chase. I mean, it was kind of like, it looked like my first impression on this was that this guy did this on purpose. That's what it looked like. You just see him flip over and the legs flailing in the air like that. It was, I'm going to say, if you put some, comedic music behind it, you get a little laugh out of it. But yeah, it could have been really, really bad. And thankfully, there was a little bit of a safety net there for him.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I watched it way too many times. He does kind of scorpion, like that. I think that show How Ridiculous, not How Ridiculous,
Ridiculousness.
Ridiculousness. That's their icon, the person in the scorpion. His body certainly cranks in half. But then it reminded me of, like gymnastics we used to watch during the Olympics in the 70s and 80s, that uneven parallel bar. So when he goes and scorpions over, his legs kind of hit the barrier behind it. So it only looks like there's a small, 1 or 2 foot gap in between the edge of the infinity pool and then the real edge that would drop him from that deck down into the kids' deck. And it certainly looked like his legs almost went over that other barrier, which, could you imagine if you're down there in the kids area with your kids and here comes some dude in his bathing suit just... That would have been detrimental. But I wonder if this will cause Royal to even look at that area and say, I mean, the big conversation every time is like, oh, you don't just fall off of a cruise ship. Yeah, that guy was obviously doing something that he shouldn't have been doing, and all of a sudden he's fallen over to cruise ship. And this is the same week that the whole employee altercation jumping off the ship.
The same sailing.
The same sailing, yeah. It's insane. This is my conspiracy theory. I believe, and I think I just saw you post something on your Facebook group, but I believe that it all started with the Netflix Poop Cruise documentary. I think that they put some crazy voodoo mojo into the cruise space, because since the Poop Cruise documentary came out, we have had a handful of cruise ships that have broken down, like Celebrity Beyond and I think Sapphire Princess. All these ships are having mechanical issues. And I feel like that's related to the Poop Cruise documentary. Then we get the Amy documentary. I can't remember her last name. She goes missing. And now we got all these weird people things happening on cruise ships. Do you believe that Netflix is in league with a magical force, and now they're causing havoc in the cruise space? Can we lay that on Netflix, or does that seem too fantastical?
That's it, obviously, clearly what's happening. What else could be happening? And it's Bradley. The only reason I remember the last name is because the brother's name is Brad, and the parents named him Brad Bradley. Yeah, so that's that. But yeah, so on the same sailing, could you imagine if you're on the sailing? Well, somebody jumped off the ship, and they after a stabbing spree, they jumped off the ship, and then they unfortunately passed away. And then now you have somebody doing flips off the back of the ship, of the F pool for a pair of glasses. I mean, we're always taught, and we always should have been taught, to measure risk versus reward. I'm all for taking risks. I'm all for having fun. But what is the reward versus the risk? Are you going to have fun? I mean, this was a very big risk to go after those glasses.
Yeah. And
to your point that you just said, yeah, it seems clearly that things lately have been happening in trends. Things have happened. Maybe it's always like that, whether it's, the unfortunate passing of some of the celebrities from our childhood and some of the incidents that are going on cruise ships. Very, very hard to explain. And you want to try to figure it out, but it's very difficult to do so.
We might just be in a cycle, and here I go getting on a cruise ship in a couple days. What do you think? So if you were the guy that flipped over the infinity pool, and the real reason that you flipped over the infinity pool was to go get glasses, would you tell your friends that, or would you just say I was goofing off? Well, like where would you go with the story now that you've survived it?
I don't think you're winning either way. So why don't you just go with the truth? It's the easiest to remember, because if you were goofing off and just did that with the, that's what I heard. Did you hear the glasses thing too, or no? Did I make that up?
I saw a glasses thing somewhere, right? So
Yeah.
that's the one that I've been running with. But then a lot of people, I said the glasses thing in my show, and a lot of commenters were like, no, I think the guy was just goofing off. I don't know. Either way, it was a bad scenario.
Yeah, I've done a lot of wacky things, in my days on cruise ships, and whether it's we don't have to get into that, but when it comes to actually putting yourself in a position to possibly fall off the ship, I stop at that.
Yeah, no doubt. And then, it's, gosh, I think it was maybe less than a month that we had the young kid that was climbing on what seemed, the whole Disney thing was wild. They showed where this child could have crawled up a railing and fallen out of a big porthole. And fortunately, that story is almost a miracle. Maybe that was before all of these negative documentaries. But the fact that little girl was able to climb the rail of a cruise ship, fall off of a cruise ship, her father, a hero, run and jump into the water, get to his daughter, tread water for 20 minutes, and the ship be able to rescue them before anything totally bad happened. That's an amazing story. That's a miracle. But again, why are we climbing on the rails? You know what I mean? And how I would never take a young kid on a cruise ship, and I know a lot of people do, and that's the way people vacation. But I was always paranoid about my kids hurting themselves, and I could imagine on a cruise ship, I would be doubly freaked out.
You have to be absolutely sure of where your kid is at all times on a cruise ship, I would think. And I think what he did, is the right move. Of course, it's heroic, and kudos to him for doing so. But the fact that the kid ends up in the drink for whatever reason, that means you're following the kid. Because in no way, shape, or form is there any other outcome that you're excused in, right?
Yeah.
We took the eye off the kid, so you got to go. We're going in and we're getting the kid. That's it.
Yeah. And if the kid passes away, I mean, what kind of life would that be? Either way. I mean, if you didn't jump in, you would live with the guilt with not jumping in. And if the kid just passes away, you're going to be devastated. It was interesting. So my brother-in-law cruises with me sometimes, and he's a big dilemmas guy. He's got all these dilemmas, right? And so when we were talking about that story, he said, well, okay, it makes sense that he jumped in for his 5 or 6 year old, but what if you saw your 20-year-old kid jump overboard? Are you jumping in the water after your 20-year-old? And I'm like, man, that's a heavy thing. I think your parental instinct may kick in and say that, but at the same time, I wonder, I don't know. I think the noble thing would be to say, if any of my kids went over the side of a cruise ship, I would go in after them. But I don't know, man.
It's a different thing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you don't. I'm not saying the answer is no because they're 20, but it's a different thing. If a 20-year-old jumps into the water or ends up in the water, I guess you could say it's not necessarily my fault. But if your toddler ends up in the water, it's absolutely your fault.
Yeah.
So I don't say no, but it's a different, I guess, perspective.
So this reminds me of another part of that dilemma story. If it can be proven that the father and the mother were negligent and that child was able to get off the cruise ship because of their negligence, should they have to pay for the rescue? Yes,
and probably worse. I would say if it's your fault either way. The kid was not watched. Kids are curious. Kids climb things. You like to think there's some sort of evolutionary thing that tells you that's bad. Over the side of that ship is bad. The water, you shouldn't do it. Getting near, but you can't rely on that. You have to watch your kid. I'm sorry, being a little hard on the parents, maybe. Kudos to him for jumping in. He did the right thing, but watch your kid.
Yeah, you got to watch the kid, man. I think it's going to be interesting to, the thing that's going to be really telling is like if there's a lawsuit at some point, right? Hey, we got footage and that kid, easily got off of the cruise ship. I think if that happens, because this is, I saw the decision of a court case. I haven't talked about it on the show yet, but there's a class action lawsuit in Australia against Princess for the COVID times. And there was a lawsuit that said, you shouldn't have let us on whatever cruise ship you let us on. My husband got sick. He almost died, but he didn't die. He recovered. And so the judge found that their claim was valid, that there was negligence on the side of Princess. And they didn't refund her $4,000. She wanted $300,000. The judge said you can have the $4,000. And then the lady, she sued for an appeal. Like, she went for an appeal because she wanted the $300,000. Well, Princess sued her for suing them for that money. So I guess the thing is, you start suing people, I think the cruise lines, their back really gets up, right? Like, because they certainly, they have a lot to lose, and that makes sense for a large corporation to go after people. But it's the weirdest thing. Like, I don't know. Again, it's been a crazy week, and I love to hear people's opinions about stuff. One of the interesting things, I did a little coverage of Celebration Key, and we can talk about that a little bit. But a lot of people like to use the term, when any kind of thing changes, when any kind of new thing comes out, it seems everybody's like, well, that's just a money grab. That's just a money grab from the business. That business is just trying to make money. And to me, that's the weirdest statement. I mean, I guess it's okay to say nickel and diming, it's a money grab. But when did people stop realizing, or how come they don't know that businesses are in business to make money? Right? I mean, I don't get it. Do you notice that with people you talk to? Like, people don't seem to have the concept that businesses are in the business to make money?
Yes. I guess the only pushback I'll give you is that, for people who have been cruising as long as maybe I or you have, we recognize a different time. You know what I mean? We recognize the time when there were so many things that were complimentary or included in the cruise that now, through whatever way, shape, or form, were either taken away from you altogether or something that you're now charged for. So I think the truth is when you talk about things that are on places like Celebration Key, these are things that are new introductions to the industry. So to call them money grabs is not fair, because these are new things that you haven't seen, and Carnival's introducing some perks to cruising that you don't always get, or you haven't gotten in the past when it comes to these islands. But when you talk about, whether it's forcing your hand to go to a specialty restaurant because the main dining room isn't up to the level that it used to be, or different little ways that the cruise lines have gotten creative and crafty in terms of separating you from the money that's in your wallet, I see where some of the frustration, and I think it's semantics when you talk about the terminology, whether it's a money grab or whether it's nickel and diming. I do see it. I do see the frustration, but the market never loses. If people are going to pay it, then the cruise lines are going to charge it. If it's something that they won't tolerate, like you saw an example of the pushback winning, right? With the Princess, with the soda, having it count towards your beverage count. So it's just a matter of the market.
The soda didn't win, though. That's the interesting thing. The soda didn't win. So Princess comes out and they say, look, here's our new package. The Premier is still the best package, right? And I really think they're trying to encourage people to go to the Premier. Inside the drink package on Premier, unlimited drinks, alcoholic, non-alcoholic, coffee, tea, soda, mocktails, regular cocktails, unlimited, as long as the price of that drink is under $20. They did put a limit on bottled water. What I think's happening is the same thing that happened when drink packages were new to the industry. People are just sharing, right? So, my buddy's got the Premier package, him and his wife. I didn't get a drink package. We're going out on an excursion. They go to the bar and say, hey, buddy, can I get like 4 bottles of water and 3 Diet Cokes? And that works. I've done that on a Princess, ship before. And then I think what happens is they turn around and they give some of that away. So I think the cruise lines are keen to that. And they're like, okay, well, how can we tighten up? How can we tighten up that loss? And so now you can only get 12 bottles of water on both of the packages. But man, they go a little crazy on that Princess Plus. They say, okay, you're going to get 15 drinks. You can still get 12 waters, but beyond the water, 15 drinks. And everything counts. You get a fountain soda, now you can get 14 drinks. You get a specialty coffee, now you can get 13 drinks. You get 3 beers, now you can get 10 drinks. And for about a week, people are like, that's crazy. We never did that before. And they go, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to compromise. You can get specialty coffee and tea. And I got an email, that said, "Hey, just to let you know, we did change our policy in response to people saying, now we can do coffee and tea." And I quickly emailed back, and I'm like, "But what about the soda?" And they're like, "No, soda still counts. So soda is still going to decrement that thing from 14 down to 13. A 2-cent fountain diet soda is going to take one of your slots on that Princess Plus program." That's crazy. Talk about things that are never like that before. But I think, we could call it a money grab, but I think it's an enticement to pay $30 more a day to get the premier package.
Definitely, that's what it is. Now, but didn't they also make a change and walk back something with the fountain soda? Didn't they say you can request a can?
Yeah, so since the dawn of that program, you could always get a can. Maybe 6 months ago, they switched it to fountain soda. And, I was still under that on my last cruise to Alaska just, I think, a few weeks ago. And it sucked. Like, I wanted a Coke Zero. The only thing they had in the gun was Diet Coke. If I wanted Coke, I could get the fountain Coke for free on my package or included on my package, which was the Plus package, which now that would count against me. I could get the gun for the included price, but I had to pay $3 for a can. And I just remember getting off in Juneau, and I went into a store there, and I bought a can, and I was making a video, and I'm like, "Look what you're making me do, Princess. You're making me get a can."
Right.
And but now I guess in response, not to me, but in response to a lot of people saying that, you can now get a can again, as long as they have it. I just read the letter again. It's like, "Hey, just so you know, if you want a can, you can get a can if we have it." So it's an interesting thing. But really, if you look at the numbers of cruising, as like you mentioned, the market demand is higher than ever before. I heard John Heald, the brand ambassador from Carnival, talking about that Carnival Vista cruise that he was on that went to Celebration Key for the first time. I think he said that there was over like 3,000 brand new cruisers on that cruise. That's a lot of new cruisers. And some people say, "Well, do you think that these cruise lines are trying to push away their loyal customers?" And I'm like, I'm sure there's some, accountant, bean counter somewhere that has worked out some sort of algorithm that says we've squeezed the most out of our loyal customers already, right? We're going to grandfather diamonds. And then in those 6 years, those diamonds aren't going to spend a lot of money anyways. And so the ones that aren't spending money, they can go away. And the ones that continue to spend money, we'll reward them with loyalty. But the real money for us lies in the new cruiser, who this will be their new experience. They won't know what the olden days were. They won't sit around somewhere and be like, "Do you remember the olden days when, we could shoot skeet and, everything was included and there were midnight buffets with dancing girls?" That, I think, somebody's just working the math on that. And it's a weird thing, right? And I feel like I'm a little too hard about it with like, "Oh, people don't understand that things change." But the reality in everything that we do in life is there's constant change, right? And, if we're good consumers and the company changes on us and we don't like it, then we go spend our money somewhere else. They have less customers and then they have to give us more back. But the problem, the challenge that I see with cruising during COVID, "I'm never cruising again. These SOBs, it made me take a shot and put on a mask. I'm never cruising again." And then the people that I know that said that, they're like, "Yeah, I got 3 cruises booked for this year. Now the cruising starts again," right? "I'm never cruising with Carnival again because they've changed the loyalty." It would not surprise me if a lot of those people that are taking that hard stance will be on a Lido deck somewhere trying to do the curly shuffle or whatever, because I don't know. I just think that's just the way it works out. And then I guess I have to, because I've been an old man on the lawn for the last 15 minutes, I do have to say cruising still is the best value out there. I get even more irritated when I have to take a land-based vacation now and pay for every meal and pay for every entertainment and pay for every drink. So, I think cruise executives know that they have the leeway because they do offer the best value to decrease that value, and they're still going to pull customers. So I don't know where I was going with that. What's something that's changed that you missed the most from the cruise experience, from your lifetime of cruising experience?
Well, I still enjoy it very, very much. So I guess, I think with the newer ships, my take is, and again, to stay on the, get off my lawn type of thing, I think a lot of the bells and whistles and all the features that have been added to a lot of the cruise ships have created a little bit of a chaotic experience. And I think, being in the restaurant and hospitality business most of my career, I've always said, when the staff is happy, when the managers are happy, that usually transcends to a happy guest. And I think when you have all these other features and all these other rules and regulations and things that they have to operate, maybe they're just like us. They're learning this stuff. They have to get trained on it. It has to work. They break down sometimes. So I think, with all these features that go on, I think it just creates a little bit more of just us getting away from why we all cruise in the first place, which is to enjoy the beaches, to enjoy the sun, to enjoy the horizon, the pools, the fun times. And, and I'm sure you're probably going to cover this. It's just, what Carnival is going through right now seems to be a complete and total identity crisis. And I just miss a lot of just what cruising offered from a simplicity standpoint. As much as I do stay connected while I'm at sea, I miss that forced disconnection that you had when you step across that threshold onto that, from the gangway. You realize that, what, the world, your job, everything, it's going to have to spin on its own for a week or so. And you know what, if you have to get in touch with me in an emergency, yes, reach out. Otherwise, I'll see you in a week. Now it's like, yeah, I'm at sea. Yeah, today's a sea day. You could text, you could DM, you could send photos, this and that. Good in a lot of ways, but I kind of do miss that forced, disconnection that you would have with society when you went on a ship.
That's really interesting. I mean, when I first started cruising in 2017, it was still like that a lot. There wasn't much that you could do on your phone. There weren't these apps that the cruise companies were using to show you menus and to let you order things, all those kind of things. And the internet was pretty horrible back in 2017 on cruise ships. So on my very first cruise, I just said, look, exactly what you said. Hey, kids, if you need to get a hold of us, this is the 800 number you call. They'll try to get me on the ship, that kind of thing. And now I'm disconnected. And I think we were only on the ship for 2 days before we went from Mobile, Alabama, and we showed up in Key West. And, I guess I was so addicted to technology. It's like, oh, I can't wait to get back on my phone, see what's going on, that kind of thing. But, I'm really glad we had this conversation, because this is a problem I've been trying to wrap my head around. Cruising is exploding, and I'm trying to figure out what the cruise companies did to make it explode. Like, why do people all of a sudden become hip to cruising? Because when you watch The Love Boat and stuff like that, either you're going to get hooked into it, hooked into that thing that you're saying, look, I'm going to get on a ship and I'm not going to be able to be connected. There's really not a lot of stuff to do other than kind of lay out by the pool and maybe listen to a lounge singer and play some trivia. I could play shuffleboard. That's a stereotype I had about cruising before I went on my cruise. My conception of cruising in 2016 was like, there's buffets, you're going to get to eat a lot. There's some shuffleboard. There's some small pool that you could get into, and you're going to go to a beach somewhere. And I wonder if, along the way, the cruise industry said, well, if we really want to grow, then we have to offer something different. And so maybe the whole, what people like about cruising has changed. Now, I still like all those things that I talked about, all those things that you talked about. But certainly, if you look at Oasis of the Seas, if you look at Icon of the Seas, if you look at Mardi Gras, if you look at Celebration, if you look at these newer, bigger ships, the NCL Aqua, they're definitely targeting people that want a water park or theme park type experience. And maybe that plus the technology is really shifting what cruising is. And I guess that's going to leave people that were cruising just for the relaxation of it, either searching for that experience on another cruise line or changing how they feel about cruising. Maybe that's what we're seeing for the tension. People are changing the way they feel about cruising because cruising's appealing to a different kind of vacationer. Yeah, I mean, do you see that? Do you see it being more theme parkish than it was 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think the whole thing's evolving, and you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, it seems like it did really explode out of the pandemic. And I think what we saw in the pandemic was, empty ships when they first kind of got back. And, also with the pricing. The pricing was crazy because it was like cruising was almost free for a little while. And for whatever reason, they started charging a little bit more. They started holding their ground. And initially, I think that was because of the fact that, they took, like you say, they took all these bad loans and they had to pay it back. And then I think a light bulb went off and everybody was like, whoa, they're paying this. What else will they pay for? And I think nothing makes you want more money than money itself. I think people just do. I think it is a little bit of an addiction like anything else. And They're like, well, we can charge for this, we can upgrade for that. One of the things I think that going back to the other thing that I miss is, I see you used to get that discount, on the private islands. It sounds like on Celebration Key, you're on a cruise, you already paid for the cruise, you should be getting a discount. It sounds like they're charging full price for these experiences now, and you're not really getting that I'm on a cruise discount, or I paid for the cruise already discount. I'm seeing that a lot more with a lot of specialty restaurants, whether it's Norwegian, the newer ships, and a lot of these private islands. It's just they're learning that they can separate you from your money, and they're doing a good job of it.
Yeah, the interesting thing in cruising's such a, I love the strategy behind cruising as somebody who likes business and those kind of things. Again, the enterprise is going to do what the enterprise is going to do. And because most of these companies are publicly traded, they're all driving to have good quarterly numbers, right? That was the most frustrating thing to me in corporate America, is because sometimes in life, things take longer than 3 months. Mm-hmm. And it was so hard, like at a Fortune 500 company, to say, hey, this thing that we're executing on is going to be really humming in, 180 days. And they're like, yeah, but we need the numbers to look good in 90 days because we have to get on an investor call, and our CEO has to be able to hold the flag up and say, look what I did, that kind of thing. And I feel like these larger cruise companies that are publicly traded are beholden to the street. And so they're standing up there, like big chest, like, we were able to get onboard spend to increase by 300%. And the wild thing is that's the number that they're driving to make investors happy. And at the same time, they're watching their guest satisfaction. And as long as those things are somewhat aligned, they're like, look at what we did. And it's a weird thing. I mean, like I say this a lot, and I grasped it a long time ago. The job of the entrepreneur, the job of the enterprise, of the corporation, is to extract as much of your money from you as possible while giving you the least amount of stuff. And then our job as consumer is to extract as many goods and services from a company for the least amount of money. And it's somewhere in that equilibrium where people are satisfied, or if it's way out of whack, that's where people are dissatisfied. And I think exactly what you were saying, the cruise companies were like, okay, we're charging this, and they're satisfied. We're given, included burgers, and we're given included buffet, and we're given included main dining room, and they're satisfied for this charge. What if we charge that and we give them another option to have a $50 meal? Will they buy that? This was a few years ago, right? And then all of a sudden they went, holy crap, they'll buy that. Like, they're getting included food that they've already paid for, but they'll give us $50 more. Well, let's put another one of them $50 places, and maybe we can charge more and still get the $50 place. And I think exactly to what you were saying, they just keep stacking that on top of each other. Celebration Key is so interesting. And in the beginning, when it was first announced, I said, here we go. Perfect Day at Coco Cay. Royal's been, they built the example. They said, look, we don't have to worry about protesters. We don't have to worry about people hassling you on Front Street. We don't have to worry about anybody wanting to braid your hair. People want to come down to the Bahamas. They want to get into the ocean. They want to, they want to eat food. They want to drink drinks. What if we built our own place to do that? And I think Royal did a wonderful job with Perfect Day at Coco Cay. And I always thought that because of that, other cruise lines would start going, well, how do we do that? And when I heard about the announcement of Celebration Key, I thought that's what Carnival was doing. But now the execution of Celebration Key seems like a competitor to Royal Perfect Day at Coco Cay, but it seems completely different. I heard, I love listening to John Heald. So like John Heald, the brand ambassador for Carnival, he's in an interesting spot right now. So if you watch his daily 3-minute video, at least I need to start like doing statistics on it, but at least 2 of the 5 days, some boob tuber has said something that's riled up the Carnival nation, and he's out there as the hero of Carnival fixing it. Now, the weird thing is some of the things that he says, boob tubers, he doesn't name names, which I guess he can't, but I never really find some of the things that he's talking about. So it's interesting. I wonder if now, YouTubers are being used as the scapegoat, right? Because businesses like to shape a narrative. That's my own conspiracy that I'm working on. But I think somebody was pushing back the other day about the pricing structure of Celebration Key, that all this food wasn't included, and other private islands have food included. And I think he was quick to let people know that the Celebration Key is not a private island. It's a resort. And so it's like, well, are you competing with the private island or not? Are you
Right.
trying to pull my leg out here? Like, is there something else going on? Look, I'm all for Carnival doing what they want to do. The thing that hit me like a ton of bricks is if they're going to treat it like a resort, if they're going to build a water park and treat it like a theme park, then it does seem a lot like Universal and Disney World, right? Where you go to Disney World, they're not giving you a bunch of food.
Anything.
You're buying every drink, you're buying every food. And the interesting thing to me too is if I was Carnival, the other thing that I would be saying is like, if we don't take you to Celebration Key, we're going to take you to San Juan or Grand Cayman. And you know what? If you want to do anything over there, you're going to have to pay money. You're going to have to buy an excursion. You have to book a tour. You're going to have to buy your food. So, look, we're just giving you a nicer place to hang out for the day, but it ain't free. You know,
Right.
The telling thing, and I need to go back and find the clip. I saw it on somebody's YouTube video where they were filming the opening ceremony, the ribbon cutting. You got Christine Duffy. You got the monolith that is Shaquille O'Neal towering over the crowd. You got Josh Weinstein, the CEO of Carnival Corporation. And she says, Josh, thank you for the $600 million to do Celebration Key. And he says to her, man, we better make $6 billion. And to me, that is the story of Celebration Key. It's a money-making enterprise. What do you think? Do you think it's going to, and then of course you've got the outcry, well, I'm just not going to go to Celebration Key. They've got 20 ships that are going to Celebration Key. People are going to go to Celebration Key. Do you think do you feel dissatisfied with the fact that you're only going to get one free meal, and then if you want to eat more than that, you have to pay for it? Or what do you think the rationale behind that is?
Well, obviously, I agree with everything you just said. The only thing that I would say regarding that, you know what? I get it. You're not going to get everything you want at any given time from these cruise lines, especially when they seem to be in such a, money-making stage of what the industry is. If they can get it, if they can get you to spend, they will. I'm disappointed that there is no barbecue buffet. You know what I mean? I always like to get off in the private island, even if it was, even if you had to pay $10 for it, I would make a lot of noise, be disappointed. But the fact that it doesn't exist, where you can kind of stand in line and pick what do you want, chicken and your hot dog and your flame grilled burger. Now, I know some islands have gotten away from that. It's not, it's propane or it's, other heating elements, but there was always something about just being on the private island or private resort, whatever, and going up to that all you can eat buffet barbecue that I enjoyed. That doesn't exist. So that does disappoint me a little bit. But again, it's not something that's going to make me say, I'm not going there. I'm going there in a couple of months. I can't wait. I just thought it was funny too. I, like you, listen to John Heald. And yes, the guy, let's just call it what it is. The guy has a next to impossible job. But at the same time, he does get a little. It's a little funny sometimes having him try to defend some of the things that are out there. Like, I thought it was funny too when they said there is a tram for you. There is open air vehicles. Please don't use it if you can walk. Like, I'm like, what are we doing? Are we in abundance or are we in scarcity here? Are we like on a luxury vacation where no? Please, if you can walk, do not use the tram. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's interesting, and all love to John Heald. I agree with you. I think he has a tough job, but he also has I think at the same time, he's in an interesting place. Now, I would say that probably all of his messages have been pre-screened and qualified, right? Like, I don't think he's completely out here shooting off the hip. Even sometimes when he seems like he's, I guffawed, I said something wrong or whatever. I'm pretty sure most of those messages are scrubbed and sanitized for what he's talking about. And I think he does a good job. He's a super nice guy, and he does get beat up a lot. And it's just an interesting dance, because we live in a world, honestly, where anybody can review something, anybody can talk about something. And it's always interesting to me how companies who want to control a message or control a narrative, how they combat that, how they deal with that. Like with the Hawaii thing, I shared a video that Mandy, the cruise planner, put up of her just sheer terror of pulling up to the ship and it pulling off. And, she said, hey, at this point, we really haven't any, communication from Norwegian. I've got no reason to doubt that that's true. I don't know why, I think it's a big leap to say, oh, she's just making that up. But yet people are saying that, like, oh, they've communicated with them. And I'm like, it's funny how in this age where everybody can put information out there, how that information tries to get controlled. And you definitely see it at the cruise line level. I tell you what, I wish every cruise line had a brand ambassador. I think this is a strength by Carnival. I know they catch a lot of crap, but the interesting thing for me is if you have that constant communication with your customer, I think you get a really good sense of what satisfies and dissatisfies the customer, and you can make decisions that way. Sure, you got to eat a lot of poop. You got to take a lot of abuse from people, but the data that they get at the end of the day in those interactions, I think are so valuable to these companies. I wish I think it also makes it easy fodder for people who hate Carnival. I've decided so say somebody's never cruised on Carnival, you're talking about a Carnival story, and they're like, yeah, it's because it's Carnival. I think that is the laziest criticism out of anybody out there. Why do you think Carnival just gets a bad rap because they're so public with what's going on with them, and then it's just easy to jump? It's almost like picking on the fat kid. Like it's just the easy thing to do.
A little bit. And those people who say that, of course, I would never cruise Carnival. They're saying that because they think that puts them in a certain class of people that it really doesn't put you in. You don't know the first thing about Carnival. If you've been on some of the Carnival cruises that I've been on, they offer, and to also echo your sentiment, absolutely, John Heel does a great job. He is a nice guy. And yeah, it's one of the toughest jobs in the industry. I'm sure he is paid very well, but he takes a lot of fire. And you see, sometimes he has to step away a little bit, and it gets a little crazy for him. But yeah, I do think that is an unfair criticism of Carnival that they get very often. But at the same time, they are in a wild transitional space right now. And honestly, I can't say they didn't kind of do it to themselves. You know what I mean? They made a couple of mistakes. I always say on my show, Carnival's going to be fine. They're going to get through it. They're going to figure out what has to be done. But I feel like they've let the reins go a little bit, and then they've tried to correct. And then now I think they're in a scenario where they're overcorrecting. And again, it will settle itself out. But they're having some wild times over at Carnival.
It's interesting what you say there. So the reputation they have certainly is that people get aggressive on Carnival. We've seen fights on Carnival. Unfortunately, it does appear that, a lot of times those fights involve black people. And so I think they've opened themselves, and I don't think this is Carnival's fault either, but do you think maybe, like we were talking about earlier, that, people's conception of cruising is this super chill, look at the water, go to the beach kind of thing? Do you think that in the attempt to make cruising for everybody, and I think that's a positive thing, to make cruising for everybody, do you think they didn't have the foresight that the way that cruising and the way the behaviors of cruisers were? Do you think they didn't have the foresight that would be different, and that's where they didn't adjust?
I just think that from the beginning, Carnival was just, the discounted cruise line, but it was very, very family friendly. And I think it still is. Most people don't realize it. That's what it is. But, it got to a point where, they started offering something that I thought was good. A little bit of a dive into a little bit more controversial, cutting edge music. They would play hip hop music or whatever that other cruise lines wouldn't play. And that was a novelty at one point where people were enjoying it. It would happen late night at the club. It would happen at the Serenity deck where they would do a white party. And they would still play some music that you just wouldn't hear on other cruise lines. And that started getting a lot of younger people. Yes, it does happen to be a lot of young black people, but it's all demographics. It doesn't matter what the demographics are, But then as that word got out, and as Carnival continued to be the discount cruise line, I think that started to, that type of theme and that type of music started to spill out into the sail away party, into the pool deck during the day, and then a lot of the line dances became just a little bit more to a degree where it was less family friendly. And that, again, that's a certain demographic or not. It's young people, it's old people. You don't want any one demographic niche, let's call it, taking over the whole ship. You could say it for 70s dads too. A bunch of 70s dads running around knocking over tables with their yacht rock and stuff like that. That would be a horrible scenario. You want it to be I always said, like almost like a wedding, where everybody, a playlist, music, I just think that now what they're doing in the overcorrection part of it is now they're taking the nightclub and saying, we're not going to play certain songs. And on certain nights of the nightclub, it's going to be theme night the whole way through. That's not going to work. Nobody's going to want to go to a nightclub and hear 4 hours of soca music or country music or 70s music or hip hop music. They're going to have to go back to the switch up open format, but that's just something that they're going to have to go through. I think what they need to do is just hold the line, control the controllables, make the cruise ship family friendly for 80% of the experiences on there, and just hold strong to that. Enforce the dress code. Don't play out of pocket music. Don't go crazy with the, but then have your little niche areas where it's late night after midnight. Yeah, go in a little bit more of a certain direction. Have certain parties late night where, you kind of live on that cutting edge. But, the overcorrection is going to set them back, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a wild thing because, again, I think cruising is for everybody, and certainly the Carnival price point and the Carnival environment with the club and the sail away and everything certainly attracts people that like to party a certain way. And maybe that does lean heavily on one demographic, but the thing that's a challenge is hopefully in the overcorrection they don't disenfranchise anybody. I mean that's the big thing, and that was the big controversy from a couple weeks ago or last month. Like, are these new policies specifically targeting black people to dissuade them from coming on Carnival? And if they are, I think that's a huge mistake because, again, I think cruising is a wonderful thing for everybody. But yeah, I mean, to your point, it's interesting. So like Virgin Voyages is not family friendly because they don't cater to families at all. But you don't have some of the shenanigans going on Virgin Voyages. So it's a tough thing to say that the correction has to be there somewhere. I know we talked about it. You worked in nightclubs. You say that there are songs that will incite people to violence. And if that's true, and those songs could be identified, then I could see not playing those songs if you're going to incite people to violence. But at the same time, I think it's disingenuous to really kind of market and get folks on the cruise ship and then don't give them what they think they're going to get. Because I've seen some of that also, like, hey, I came on this cruise and it's nothing like I thought it was going to be. I don't know how Carnival's going to fix it, but again, I think it's a big mistake if the course correction is to start making cruising not be for everybody, because I think that's I don't think you can do that. I think cruising is for everybody.
You do, Tony. You do it with dress code. You do it with music, and you do it with price point. That's how you control what you can control. And obviously, Carnival is discount cruise line. You should absolutely enforce a dress code that's going on while you're doing a sail away party, because a sail away party is a perfect opportunity for you to set the tone for what the next 7 days are going to be like. So play the wobble, but then go to play Don't Stop Believing, or give the whole gamut, run the whole gamut. What you're seeing sometimes on some of these sail away footages is just a mass amount of people, just basically twerking to some lewd music because Carnival let it get a little out of control. Have that type of stuff. Don't say now we're not doing it whatsoever, and now we're going to do a whole nightclub run where everybody's going to be sitting around hearing songs that they never heard of or because it's just not fair. Like you said, you got to give them what they want, but put it in the places where it's appropriate and keep it out of where it's not appropriate.
The interesting thing, though, Tommy, so like you got to give the people what they want, right? And so this is the thing. You go down to Miami, and that Miami crowd wants a certain type of music. I've cruised out of Texas, out of Galveston. They don't want the same music that they want in Miami. So if you're going to play the wobble, some heavy metal song, and then finally get to the music that they want in Texas, they're going to be dissatisfied too. So I don't know. Part of me goes, you cater to the crowd that you have. You have to control security issues for sure. You can't have people being aggressive and violent toward each other. I don't know how you change that, but at the same time, maybe changing the cruise experience does it, but you're going to push away people, and you may end up with no crowd at all. I guess that's the risk that Carnival's running. But
well, I wouldn't say heavy metal music. I mean, there's a way to control it. When you see, I've been in DJ, I've DJed. You just look at the crowd. You see when it's a very, very diverse crowd, there are certain songs you can go to that I know will satisfy everybody. You can go the Prince route, the Michael Jackson. You could play some 70s music, and then you can give them a little bit of Kanye West, but then go back to some Bruno Mars. This is all family-friendly, radio-friendly music. You know, some of the Kanye stuff and this and that you got to play the edited versions of, but there are absolutely ways to do it without kind of letting, you know, just an absolute free-for-all go on with lewd dancing and lewd line dancing and basically a playlist that's going to have any family just confused or any elderly person confused. There's a way to do it. And then you know what? When you want to go to that cutting edge level that Carnival does, that I like that they do that. I always enjoyed it. Do it in the appropriate places, after dark, in the nightclubs, at certain parties. And, you know, you have that for too. But it's not wrong for people to say, like, there's certain types of levels of decorum that are not going to be accepted on these family-friendly cruises. So, you know, I want to give everybody what they want, but you also have to have some level of expectation. I talk about it being like a wedding, you know, like a wedding. Every day is fun for everybody to be had at a wedding, but it is. I'm not saying it's easy, Tony. It is tricky.
Yeah, they're definitely dealing with that now. The other thing that I've speculated on, the other thing that I've suggested is that we live in a different time now where everybody feels entitled to shoot their mouth off. And a lot of times you can shoot your mouth off with zero or little consequence. People do it, of course, online all the time behind the keyboard. But then sometimes on these cruise ships, you'll go and you'll just see people that will freely shoot their mouth off. And then I think a lot of times where you see some of these altercations is where you shoot your mouth off and you don't know who you're shooting your mouth off to, and they punch you in the face. You know, like I think about that incident that happened in the main theater. You know, this guy didn't like the way somebody was acting in the theater. And he said, hey, man, you got to calm down. And the guy broke a glass over his head. And that's a white guy, right? So, I mean, again, this whole I just get annoyed. I mean, I'm trying not to talk around the issue. Anytime you talk about Carnival, there's a slew of racist comments. People say, oh, black people shouldn't get to cruise, or, you know, and to me, it's absurd. I don't really know how to combat that. You know, I just... The best that I can say is that, you know, everybody should be able to cruise, and the cruise lines have to do a better job of ensuring people's safety and security. But violence happens regardless of skin color and, you know, demographic, all that kind of thing. But I do think there's a problem in the world today where people, you know, don't know when to shut their mouth. And, you know, people will come back and say, well, it's freedom of speech. You should be able to say anything. And I believe that's true. You are free to say anything, but sometimes when you say stuff, there's consequence. Do you see that more and more where people feel more entitled to shoot their mouth off?
Yeah, people, I think it's social media as well. People think that they're in the comment section. You're not in the comment section. You're in real life. And you could have a very serious problem on your hands if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person. You don't know what people's days are like. You don't know what, you know, this world is. I do really feel like the world is kind of changing. And, you know, I think it's mostly social media that has put people on a level of, or on an edge that they weren't previously on. And you have to be careful what you say to people, how you approach them. I mean, not everybody's a trained MMA fighter. So be, like you just say, if you want to say something, be prepared. And it's not always, as you know, it's not always somebody who can beat you up. Sometimes it's worse than that. So obviously on a cruise ship, there's less of a threat of any type of weaponry. But in your day-to-day life, just remember, when you run your mouth, you're not in the comments section. You are in real life.
And, you know, all of these things aside, bookings are up. You know, bookings on every cruise line, they're saying over 100%, you know, occupancy, and future bookings are up. So, you know, the cruise lines are adjusting, and, you know, the main thing for them is to keep their ships full and to build new ships and to keep collecting that money. And all that's happening.
Let me ask you, Tony, do you think that this is a so I agree with that. Obviously, the numbers don't lie. Bookings are up. The cruise lines are doing better than they've ever done before. But this could go two ways. It could be a bunch of people that never thought about cruising that just want to test the waters. You know what I mean? And this could be sort of like a, you know, what would you call it, a boom that could eventually go back down? Or do you think this is a push that's here to stay?
So if you look at it, I think when I started in 2017, there were 19 million cruisers. And I think cruising, and I saw a statistic the other day, I think cruising's like 10% of the global travel market. 19 million cruisers, and I think we're going to have over 30 million, approaching like 32 to 35 million this year. And that's been a steady climb, only stopped by COVID. I think with the theme park, making cruise ships like theme parks, I think building out experiences that are more resort-like, changing what traditional cruising is to something less formal. I think that you're going to continue to see cruising. It could bust. It could bust. And I think maybe Carnival is trying to take away some of the negative press that they get because they don't want it to bust, right? If you get too much of a reputation that you're going to get hassled on a cruise ship, then the person that's going to be a new cruiser, I don't think they'll go. It'll be up to some other company to market to that person to get them on a cruise ship. But I don't know why it would stop, Tommy. I mean, other than if people run out of money and run out of desire to do something fun, I think there's enough appeal of a cruise ship that because we've seen them get banged up on environmental issues. We've seen them get banged up on, our people being, falling over the cruise ship. We've seen all of those stories come out, and it doesn't seem to slow down the momentum. So I'm not saying that it could never bust, but certainly the trend over ever since I've been cruising over 10 years, coming up on 10 years, is up, 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 and up. Other than the shutdown.
Yeah.
It's
tricky.
Hope so,
it's tricky. I'm just going back to your question before. I'm just while you're talking, I'm just thinking about just the way cruising's changing, and if there's one thing I could think of that I really, really miss about how it used to be. I mean, what do you think about all these kind of like pulling the plug on late night eateries and Carnival used to be 24, and that probably does have a tie-in when you're talking about the security issues, right? That's what.
Yeah.
So not being able to go into the back of the ship and the Pizza Pirate or whatever it is and get yourself a couple of slices of pizza before bed. Can't really do that anymore. Do you think that's a direct correlation to what we're seeing from a behavioral standpoint?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things, right? In business, obviously, the way that you improve your profit margin is you charge more or you improve your operating cost. And so I think what we saw early on as these companies attacked their debt, they wanted to keep prices similar to what they were. They had to drop prices a lot just to get people back on cruise ships. So how do you protect your profitability? How do you pay off all of that debt? You start scaling back your operating costs. So I think when it comes to late night food, I think it does serve two purposes. I think some whiz-bang's able to say, look, we can cut the labor from the pizza, we can improve our operating costs, but we also remove the opportunity for people to congregate, people that have been, people to congregate at 3 a.m. What do we know about people that are up at 3 o'clock in the morning? They might be inebriated, right? They're probably charged up from being in the club. And now you've got a bunch of kind of rowdy people trying to calm down in a buffet area, trying to get a slice of pizza where the line's going to be crazy anyways because you don't have enough pizza made. I think there's probably a lot of pluses for the cruise line to say, let's scale that food back. How late do most people stay up on a cruise ship? Like, Granny and Grandpa might be staying up till midnight because they're acting crazy on a cruise. But who's up at 1 o'clock? Who's up at 2 o'clock? Who's up at 3 o'clock? Those are probably people that have been drinking, probably people that may be, willing to look. They're looking for something, right? Looking for fun or, looking for a fight and maybe cutting back on some of these eateries. We'll leave, you can get your room service 24 hours a day, that kind of thing. But maybe we shouldn't have food 24 hours a day. I can see that. I can see that being a reason. But if you look at all of these food options, like you said, there's more and more specialty restaurants. I've been saying it. You've been saying it, ever since I've been cruising. If you want banquet style food, go to the main dining room. They're preparing that food en masse. They're plating it all at once. That's big batch cooking right there. When you cook big batch, the quality of that food is diminished versus cooking a plate one at a time. And so now if you really want good food on a cruise ship, if you want that one plate at a time type cooking, you've got to pay for that. You got to go to a specialty restaurant. I think even like in, they used to have escargot every night in main dining rooms on cruise ships. They don't do that anymore. Like these expensive items, they went, well, let's just not have escargot every night. And we'll save X amount of dollars, that kind of thing. So I think you see it twofold. The late night stuff, I think they're trying to control the crowd, but also I think on all of these things, they're trying to figure out where they can cut the operating cost, the food cost, whatever goes into that operating cost to jump up into the profitability. Because I'm sure you've noticed it too after the shutdown, the quality of the food. Sometimes the food tastes like it came from a lesser quality place than what it used to. So I think that's happening.
Tony, isn't it funny that when you listen to when they're advertising for these cruises and they're trying to get you to book all the things that they're offering you and all the amenities and all the delicious food and the cocktails and everything like that, but then when you listen to the earnings calls, you hear them kind of also with the same enthusiasm bragging about how all the costs they're cutting and what they're taking away. And we're not necessarily supposed to hear that's not their advertising arm, but they are doing a very, very good job at balancing the two.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember I took some sort of marketing or advertising class one time, and that was the tagline. The first thing that the instructor said was, "Hey, I just want to let you know that advertising is a code word for taking people's money. That is essentially it." And it is interesting to see the different dynamic between marketing and an earnings call, right? Because earnings are all about what we did to improve certain numbers to make us more profitable. And the funny thing is, one of those numbers that they track is how much they spend on marketing, which is just how much money we spent to get people to come give us money. So it goes back to what we were saying earlier with the loyalty thing. A new cruiser may come onto a cruise ship. Let's say a Carnival cruise ship. They may have a Guy's Burger. They may have 10 Guy's Burgers. Isn't that the coolest thing ever? You can eat as many hamburgers as you want on a cruise. I went to the buffet. It's as good as like the Golden Corral down the street. And then I went to the main dining room, and people came and brought me food, and I didn't have to pay $70 check at the end of it. I didn't even have to wait I could just get up and leave. That's amazing. And for the first time cruiser, it's still going to be that same mind-blowing thing as it was for us. But we just know that the food was a different quality back then. And so I think it's easy for the cruise company to go, okay, you're upset because the food quality is different. You'll be done cruising with us soon anyways. We're interested in this new person that we can hook into the system. So again, I think they know somehow what the calculation is for the amount of people that used to cruise that no longer cruise with them compared to how many new cruisers they're bringing in.
Do you think they strategically set the tone, I guess, for the quality of the main dining room? Do you think that nowadays they're making that to a level of quality that's going to make you want to spend in the specialty restaurants?
For me, it's always been true. I just remember the first cruise maybe it was the second cruise, we tried the steakhouse on the Carnival Liberty, which I think is one of those Fahrenheit 555s. That's when it became clear to me. Now, I used to work at a big hotel in Nashville, Tennessee called the Opryland Hotel, which was eventually bought by Gaylord. And so I worked in a fine dining restaurant where we had a team of chefs preparing food, plate by plate. But then I would also get extra hours working in the banquet department where you would see a team of people making 400 pieces of chicken at the same time, a baked chicken, and putting it on a plate that already had, food on it that you're just going to pile up and take out. And to me, it became very obvious to me, even on my second cruise, that there's different levels of food and that you would have to pay for the best food experience. I don't know that they're diminishing the non-pay food to get you to pay for the food, but I think they're trying to find that level where it's just good enough. Because there's going to be some people that never buy food, right? I've talked to plenty of people that were like, why would I buy food after I've already paid for included food, right? And then, you say, well, specialty is nice because it's a more intimate thing. Maybe you have a date night, that kind of thing.
You get the price break.
Yeah, sometimes you get a price, but and then people will be like, yeah, but still, I'll just go eat in the buffet or whatever. Maybe it's a strategy to make the food quality poor so that you go to the specialty. But we see a lot of these ships that have specialty dining that's sold out, and so you can't even get into it. So I definitely think they love it when people buy extra food that after they've already had included food. But I almost think it acts separately where the people that run the buffet and people that run the main dining room are saying, okay, what level of food do we have to have that people will be okay with, where they won't, riot or something like that. So, I don't know. That the interesting thing to me, if we really talk about cash grab and nickel and diming, If we ever run into a cruise line where you have to pay for the buffet and pay for the main dining room, to me, that's when cruising's broken, right? Because the promise of a room and included food and some included tea or water or something like that, where you don't have to pay anything. To me, that is the big promise of cruising, along with entertainment, right? If I have to start paying for the comedy show or the production show or to see a band, cruising is broken for me, because those are the big pillars for me: included entertainment, included food, some sort of included non-alcoholic beverage, and then of course your room. That's the magic of cruising to me. And I think if that ever breaks, I think cruising is going to be in trouble. But I think what they know is that they can give that foundation, and now they realize, I don't think it's that much of a stretch, right? How long have like the souvenir shops been on cruise ships? How long has the jewelry shops been on cruise ships? How long has the purse place been on cruise ships? How long have people been paying $25 for an 8x10? I'm surprised it took them this long to go, well, they'll spend money on all that. Why won't they buy a piece of Wagyu beef? So it doesn't seem like a stretch to me to figure out more things that people will charge for. And I tell you what, I'd rather pay for a steak than a $25 poorly printed picture. You know what I mean?
All day, especially in the digital world, right?
Yeah, man, we have said a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot more to say. Let's circle back. Let's finish up with a little bit of a discussion on Celebration Key. Have you watched some of the videos? What are your impressions of Celebration Key? Beyond the fact that we know there's some challenges with having to spend money for food and drink. What do you think of the facility? What do you think of what they've done there?
Well, I'm excited to get there. I haven't been there yet, but I think it's like 65 days I'll be there. I like the way it seems like it's very navigable. You know what I mean? It seems like it's a nice, good loop that you can kind of go around and you can kind of see where everything is. It's easy to make sense of, and I think it has that as a little bit of an advantage over Coco Cay. Not to say that Coco Cay is confusing, but Celebration Key looks like it's a nice big circle. I love the fact that you have barbecue options. The beaches seem beautiful. I love a good swim up bar, and I do love the fact that they are offering some higher energy adult fun as well as like I said, they're always going to do the right thing and hit it out of the park for the kids with the splash zone and everything. It looks beautiful on paper, whether it's drone shots, whether it's people doing tours. I watched a bunch of them. I mean, again, from what I've seen, it looks good. You've done it yet? You've done it so far? Or?
No. Okay. I kind of it didn't hit my radar. I didn't do a good job of trying to get over there. We were thinking about going in September, but I think I'm just going to try to get on something that just goes over there. I know like the Elation goes out of Jacksonville or something on a 3 or 4 day and ends up over there. I do want to go see it. So I've watched a ton of videos. The big thing that I like is that pier doesn't look too long and it's covered. And so, I know I said we didn't have to talk about the paying for food, but you could easily get back to if you're going to spend the day over there, you could easily come back for lunch. It's not like if you go to Nassau or something and all of a sudden you're at John Watley's distillery and you're like, oh, I'm hungry, but I don't want to pay for food. How am I going to get back to the cruise ship? Over at Celebration Key, you could just come back and eat lunch and then go back to Celebration Key. So I think that's an option that I think a lot of people will eventually take advantage of. But I like the fact that it's a short pier, and exactly what you said, it's just a big circle, right? And they've got trams that go on both sides of the circle. I like the lagoon aspect. I like that big pool because I'm more of a pool person than getting in the ocean water. The left side is supposed to be adults only, but I've heard some conflicting stories about whether they're actually running kids out of there or not. I feel like if you're going to call it that, adult friendly or whatever, you got to run the kids out of there. But the thing that I'm trying not to get on a soapbox. The thing that annoys me are these entitled people that will be over in the 18 plus area and be like, well, what's the big deal, man? It's just my kid, screaming and smacking his sister, like, you had kids too. Why are you upset? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm upset because the thing said adults only, and there's a whole half a freaking lagoon over there for you and your screaming kids, Well, I don't want to be with a bunch of screaming kids. Yeah, neither do we. So take your kids somewhere else. I don't know if they're enforcing that or not, but I tell you what, if the signage says adults only, I think they should enforce it, But I think it's nice. Everything that I've seen is nice. It's being staffed by people from Freeport. And I think it's a big boon for Freeport, right? There's really not a lot going on Grand Bahama, not Freeport proper, but, not a lot going on Grand Bahama. So I got to assume that the agreement there has something to do. Maybe the food thing is like some of those restaurants may be getting money for Grand Bahama, right? Could you imagine that? Like, I don't know if it's that obvious, but what if they're partially locally owned or run, you know, and that's why they're taking credit cards and all that other stuff. But I don't know. I think it's nice, and it's going to be interesting when they get a couple ships in there and fill the thing up and see what it's like. But I'm interested. I'm excited to go see it.
Here's an advantage to that Grand Bahama Celebration Key has over Coco Cay, is that you have everything that you would expect with the amenities of a cruise line resort, but you have a whole list of other excursions. Not that Grand Bahama is the most popular place to go, but you can have a whole bunch of other local experiences on top of that. You can go snorkeling, you could do native tours, island tours, and there's sightseeing that you can do, resort for a day type of things if you're not interested. So you have both options.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if something sprang up there even more so than now, right? Like if all of a sudden all these people are going to be here, I bet you there's going to be new interesting tour opportunities. People pitch into the cruise line, hey, sell an excursion now. Kind of like what Mahogany Bay there in Roatan.
Right.
That's essentially a resort type place, but you can go beyond the gates there and go out and do some stuff.
Yeah, and what else? The Dominican Republic, Amber Cove too, as well.
Amber Cove, yeah, absolutely. So we'll diverge for this last part away from cruising. One of my favorite, I don't even know if it's an icebreaker, but I feel like it tells you something about somebody, and I think it's more apropos this week with this past couple of weeks with the passing of Ozzy. A question that's always fascinating to me is if you could see any musical act, any band in their original lineup that you can't today for whatever reason, who would you like to see?
Okay, you gave me no time to think about this. I would have loved to little hint a couple hours ago. I could have given this some thought. The first thing that comes to mind is maybe like Led Zeppelin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They rocked out. And that was speaking of. I know you're on a journey with with wax and record albums and things like that. I remember I found my dad's collection, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all sitting right there.
Oh,
The
wow.
Who, Tommy, all that stuff, and I kind of fell in love with that music through that, playing records and stuff like that. So I would say Led Zeppelin in their prime. Maybe the Rat Pack, maybe like Sinatra back in the day with those guys doing it, right?
That would be crazy.
The whole routine.
Yeah, like in Vegas or something, right? Like where you're at a table somewhere doing the whole, that kind of show. No,
Hey, you can't not say Elvis. Elvis, I would say too, maybe.
I would definitely like to see an Elvis. I'd like to see comeback Elvis, like late '60s black leather Elvis, right before it really kind of got super challenging for him. Of course, I'd like to, my Mount Rushmore of bands like that. I'd like to see the Beatles. I'd certainly like to see Queen in their prime, with Freddie fronting that. I would have liked to seen Prince, but it's interesting. I never saw Ozzy live, and I'm very familiar with that music, and it definitely shaped some of my teenage years. But it's weird. Like we're both in our 50s. It's super weird when people that are kind of iconic in your life start to pass away. I mean, I remember I felt the pain when Michael Jackson died, when Prince died, that kind of stuff. But, Ozzy just seemed beyond time a little bit, and he always seemed like he shouldn't be around, like he always seemed a little messed up, but he always seemed a little bit beyond time. So it's kind of weird. And then Hogan, same thing. Like I couldn't imagine a world where Hulk Hogan wasn't popping up on some weird wrestling event or something, it was very weird.
You're talking about two guys who took what they did to a different level, because everybody knows Ozzy was in, what was it? What was the band?
Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath. And, he was popular then, but then he comes out of Black Sabbath and basically almost invents the heavy metal genre. And then you had Hulk Hogan, where wrestling was a very localized thing. Yeah, they had they had their monthly, big Madison Square Garden type events, but it was kind of localized. And then Hulkamania just took it to another level where all of these people, like whether it's The Rock or whoever's out there today, I kind of lost touch a little bit, and Ozzy just gave birth to all the bands. Like, there's no probably Metallica, Iron Maiden. There's none of these bands. If there's no Ozzy, there are none of these bands.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then, of course, probably got to mention Malcolm Jamal Warner. I watch The Cosby Show every week, right? And, of course, now with Cosby having his troubles, that was the funniest thing of that whole thing. It's super tragic that the guy passes away, gets caught in a riptide, he drowns. I think he's essentially our age or something like that. and then you got to get a statement from Bill Cosby. I'm like, Bill, maybe just don't say nothing. Like,
Yeah,
I'm sure some reporter said, "Hey, Bill, what do you think?" He's like, "Oh, I really, I got drinks for that guy or something." I don't know, but
I was a big Cosby Show fan back in the day when it was Thursday nights, 8 p.m. must see TV, whatever. It was Cosby Show, and then it was Family Ties. But I loved the Cosby Show, and that was just such a freak thing. And if there was a chance, if I had an opportunity on this show, I would have worn a Gordon Gartrell shirt if I was able to.
That would have been cool. That would have been very cool. Well, cool, Tommy. Thanks for the conversation. And look, Tommy does it every week on his podcast. He's been making podcasts. I don't know too many other cruise podcasters. Maybe our friend Doug Parker, Cruise Radio, has been in the game for a long time. But man, the Always Be Booked podcast is one of those must listens when it comes to cruising. And Tommy, I always appreciate your interesting takes and appreciate you taking out the time to have this conversation.
Appreciate it, Tony. Thanks for having me on.